Hello, everybody. We're so excited to be presenting at Tidally United on the topic of digital heritage monitoring and public outreach at Egmont Key, updates for the field. My name is Laura Harrison. I'll be presenting today with my colleague Brooke Hansen and also on behalf of our other colleague, Stephen Fernandez, who's not here. We are all representing the University of South Florida, as well as our partner, Richard Sanchez from the Egmont Key Alliance. So for those of you who are not familiar, Egmont Key is a small island in Tampa Bay. It's in the central west Gulf Coast of Florida. And this is an island that is really special because of all of its cultural heritage sites and its history, and also because of the fact that it's washing away. As some of you may know from previous Tidally United presentations that we've done here, I believe it was 2019, the last time we were here, we're now very involved with using virtualization technologies, geomatics technologies, and virtual reality in an effort to develop a deeper understanding of the history of Egmont Key, the threats that it faces, and also the ways that we can incorporate concepts of sustainable tourism into our research at Egmont Key going forward.
And our research paradigm has really been a long-term process of building capacity and relations with a number of different partners and stakeholders so we can do this work appropriately and also make a positive impact on heritage at risk. So it's really important for us to partner with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, with Florida Park Service, with our nonprofit partner, the Egmont Key Alliance, as well as with the public. So many of our initiatives have involved public outreach and getting feedback on what the public would like to see at some of our cultural heritage sites, especially those that are at risk from sea level rise and other anthropogenic forces. There are a number of cultural heritage sites at Egmont Key, and we're talking about tangible cultural heritage and intangible cultural heritage. The Fort Day period at Egmont Key left a number of structures and ruins on the island, which people can tour today. But there's also a lot of intangible cultural heritage, especially from earlier periods, like when the Seminoles were incarcerated in concentration camps during the time period of 1856 to 1858. The Seminoles continue to have oral stories that they share about that time period and the darkness that that represents to their tribal history, some of them referring to this period as their Alcatraz. And there are some amazing stories associated with some escapes out of transport from Egmont Key that the Seminole tribe of Florida still highlights today as incredible, such as the story of Polly Parker and the women she was with when they escaped transport out of Egmont from the Gray Cloud when it stopped at St. Mark's. And they left, were able to go into the bush, and they traveled all the way back down to South Florida. We've been working with the Seminole Tribe of Florida for the past 5 years, collaborating with them on how they would like these stories of Egmont Key documented and shared with the public so we can learn about all aspects of history at Egmont Key, the tangible and intangible cultural heritage. One of the issues that we're looking at Egmont Key is heritage at risk. Half of Egmont Key has already disappeared into the sea from anthropogenic forces ranging from climate change and rising seas to more virulent storms, and also the dredging of the Egmont Channel, which increases the currents around Egmont, further degrading the sand coastline that you see here pictured in both our Matterport model and the map about the disappearing island. So we've been using virtualization technologies and different 3D imaging techniques to not only document this erosion and loss, but benchmark where we're at so we can see what happens when the next storm comes along. And what you see in the Matterport model on the left is the backside of Battery McIntosh kind of peeking out from an eroding sand dune. Some of the batteries from the Fort Day period are already underwater, and you can only see them today by diving or snorkeling. There is a comprehensive plan for Egmont Key that was orchestrated by U.S. Fish and Wildlife to try to conserve and protect the island. It was put out in 2010. It has not been updated since, but I'm sure that is in the plans for the near future. And as you can see from this slide, important parts of the plan include trying to stabilize the island from the erosion that is happening there, trying to protect the cultural heritage resources, and also trying to develop a more comprehensive visitor services plan. Right now, there really are no services on the island. There are no bathrooms, yet there are over 200,000 people a year that visit Egmont Key. So it's really important to try to develop some of these programs so we can have the appropriate capacity of tourists at Egmont Key without exceeding it, and making sure that tourists are not having a negative impact on the island, which is a national wildlife refuge and a really important site for nesting birds. As they fly through the Tampa Bay area, there are very few places for them to nest anymore with all of the tourism development that we have. So the southern half of the island is off limits to humans and really just for the birds. So we have to make sure we're doing appropriate monitoring to keep visitors out of those areas, and making sure that they don't deposit their trash on the island, because there are no trash receptacles or recycling receptacles there either. So we have a lot to do in our collaboration with Fish and Wildlife and Florida State Parks and our nonprofit partners, the Egmont Key Alliance, to protect the islands.
So a big piece of protecting the island comes down to finding ways to do effective monitoring of the island. So what we're looking at here is one of the aerial LiDAR models we created in partnership with Stephen Fernandez, showing the effect of beach renourishment on the size and coastline of Egmont Key. So you can see just from the aerial LiDAR flights that have gone over, these are statewide publicly available data sets. We're able to conduct these analyses at USF and figure out that there have been about 10 million additional cubic feet of sand added to Egmont Key between 2007 and 2015. There's currently another beach renourishment effort taking place at Egmont Key, and so this is one of the interventions that's hopefully going to help preserve the island into the future. But of course, beach renourishment does come with some drawbacks as well. So there's always complexities when dealing with such a site such as Egmont Key with the cultural and ecological framework, and also trying to think about these things within the context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which we'll get to a little bit more later in the presentation. So one of the key sort of areas of research that's driving our activity out at Egmont Key is incorporating geomatics technologies along with public science communication in order to address and communicate the threats facing Egmont Key. So let's take a moment to look at the NOAA sea level rise scenarios. You may be familiar with these. They were recently published and updated. As you can see in the graph on the left, there are a few different scenarios that are tied to different levels of climate action and intervention. So for example, if we as a society do nothing to curb emissions, nothing to limit greenhouse gases, we may end up with an extreme or high scenario. Whereas if we take really drastic interventions, really limiting those emissions and other factors that lead to sea level rise, we might end up with a low or intermediate low scenario. So these scenarios tie in various levels of human action, also governmental action. And what you can see in the image on the right here is how those different scenarios might play out in real life. This is a publicly available NOAA sea level rise viewer, and it's at a resolution maximum of about 9 feet. And so while this is helpful in order to, say, visualize the overall impacts on a geographical scale, we'll see, okay, the intermediate scenario in 2100 pretty much reveals that Egmont Key would be mostly washed away. We don't really have a fine-grained analysis of how that might impact exact particular structures at a centimeter scale. And so that's one of the one of the activities that we're doing in our workshops here is trying to figure out how we can incorporate terrestrial LiDAR and GIS in order to get a more fine-tuned understanding of exactly how sea level rise might impact these irreplaceable cultural heritage sites. So back in May of this year, we went out with a team of about 15 students and aspiring professionals, and we trained them how to do terrestrial LiDAR scanning. This is a little bit different from the aerial LiDAR we were looking at in that NOAA sea level rise viewer. Terrestrial or land-based LiDAR is much more accurate, but it's oftentimes not really incorporated into this type of monitoring because you have to go through and georeference those scans. What that means is tying them into map coordinates so then you can start mapping things like sea level rise. Again, typically that's something that's done with aerial or mobile LiDAR, which already has built-in positioning data sets. So here it's a little bit of an extra step. We train our students how to do that in order to generate fly-throughs such as these. And honestly, we can use these fly-throughs also as an interpretive tool, which I'll be demonstrating briefly. So what you can see here is Battery Macintosh. This is the focus of this year's research. It is a Spanish-American War fort built right around the turn of the 20th century. We scanned the full interior as well as exterior of the structure, also including the sand dune behind it. And that gives us the opportunity to take a look at the impact of sea level rise with those NOAA scenarios at a very fine grain level of detail. So in the image on the left, you can see the impact of the high scenario in 2050. The map in the center top there indicates the island will maintain roughly its same shape. This is mostly because of dunes on the east and the west that will prevent saltwater intrusion to the center of the island, thereby largely preserving it. However, if we took a look at the high scenario in 2080, we'll see that now water is intruding from the east and it's starting to flood Battery Macintosh, leaving only just a small dune. While this is helpful information, it does not incorporate data from large storms that may come through, which of course accelerate the erosion and could certainly add to this. This is basically a baseline from just sea level rise alone. A couple of screenshots here also indicate the extent of damage from sea level rise as it would impact the Battery Macintosh structure. Again, this is at centimeter level of accuracy. So once we see the high scenario of 2080, we're now able to pinpoint exactly what step in the staircase the water would rise to in that scenario. So again, in terms of communicating with our stakeholders, with our partners, and coming up with data-driven decision-making plans, this is the type of data that really represents an improvement over what's possible with the NOAA sea level rise scenarios. Those are helpful if you want to look at the entire coastline of Florida, the entire eastern seaboard of the United States, for example. But if you want to understand the exact impact of sea level rise on a cultural heritage site, these types of geo-referenced terrestrial LiDAR scans represent a big step forward. What you're seeing here is a screen recording of this simulated model. This is in GIS, so we've got our 3D georeference scan of Battery Macintosh in place, and we're now looking at the high 2080 scenario mapped against it. So of course, that's the benefit here. We're not only talking about 2D representations, we can take a look at these simulations and models in 3D in real time, building different layers for all of the different scenarios that we might want to see. Of course, in the future, we'll be incorporating the other scans that we've done at Egmont Key, including the lighthouse, Battery Melon, the cemetery, etc. So we'll be incorporating multiple sites in an effort to create a comprehensive island-wide approach to using geomatics technologies to better understand the impacts of sea level rise. In addition, one of the things we're also working on is an erosion analysis. We just did a scan after Hurricane Ian, looking at how the dune changed on the western side of the island. We'll be able to also build that type of information into simulations for the effects of storms going forward. As I mentioned, the scans we're looking at here were all taken in May. We now have those post-Hurricane Ian scans. So we basically have a before and after. And we can say already that in the 1,200 square meters in front of Battery Macintosh on that western side, we've lost about 300 square meters of sand during the storm. So again, that's the type of data that can be extrapolated out for the entire island. So that pretty much wraps up how we're using geomatics technologies to understand and monitor the ways that sea level rise and erosion will impact Egmont Key. But also a big part of the ongoing research at Egmont is really about public science communication and heritage interpretation. So I'll be touching on 3 areas that we're working on in that respect. First of all is the Egmont Key VR app and also the touchscreen. We're also working with Florida Public Archaeology Network and the Heritage Monitoring Scouts. And then finally touching on the Guardians of the Gulf AR app, which is a public science application geared towards middle school students. So first off, one of the applications for public science communication is our digital touchscreen exhibit. This brings together a lot of storytelling and archival research around Egmont Key into basically a traveling museum exhibit. It's interactive, it incorporates 3D scans that you can self-navigate. For those of you who've been to Egmont, you know it's not the easiest place to go out and visit. You've got to get on a boat, it's a full day. This is the type of way where we can bring the island to the people, give them an experience to learn more about the histories, and also it represents a big step forward for the interpretation that's already on the island, which does not cover many of the stories that are in the touchscreen exhibit itself. We're also really committed to bringing these virtual scans to the public. And so oftentimes in public outreach context, we will provide these QR tours, which also have links to the VR tours themselves. You can click on these links right now as you're watching this presentation and be taken to a public site where you can navigate around and see all the tags that add additional information to these sites and their interpretation. Another thing we've been working on recently at my lab is the Egmont Key VR app. This is an app that was designed for the Oculus Quest 2 headset using a program called Pano2 VR. We went and we took the Matterport scans of Battery Macintosh. You're looking at a screen recording of the app on the right-hand side of your screen here. And we added in interactive archival materials in addition to narration and storytelling. And this tour leads you from Battery Macintosh all the way out to the Western shoreline. So there's lots of topics surrounding cultural heritage as well as natural heritage, giving people an opportunity to sort of self-navigate and take a self-guided tour from the island from the comfort of the Access 3D Lab VR Lounge, which is also kind of interesting because it pops up in multiple locations. So we love bringing this to outreach events to reach new audiences and educate them about the many cultural and historical and natural treasures of this island. We've been fortunate enough to do a user experience evaluation over the last couple of years with about 90 participants. We've taken it to a public event at Egmont Key called Discover the Island, in addition to an event at my lab and also one at the USF Student Union. And as we can see from the survey that we gave to our participants, an overwhelming majority of them found that this VR experience did increase their interest in learning about history and sustainability. One of the other key insights of this research was that most people thought that VR would increase others' interest in learning about history and sustainability. This is something called the Net Promoter Score, which is something that's taught in business schools quite regularly. If you've ever bought something and then gotten an email afterwards that said, would you recommend buying this thing for a friend? 1 through 10, that is the Net Promoter Score, and it's a really high and powerful indicator of how a user views an experience or a product. And so asking this type of question helps us get a really good picture of sort of how effective our product is. And interestingly, with this data set, we're looking at the responses of just 13 people. These are people, a subset of our study population, who rarely participate in cultural events. They go 0 to 1 time per year. This is really not their thing. And so it's also quite powerful that we've been able to see that VR is reaching these new audiences, people who are not already interested in this kind of thing. And all of a sudden they're getting a valuable experience, and also it's something they would recommend to a friend. So we're finding this to be quite encouraging initial data. And that pretty much wraps up the VR tour. This is something that's continuing to evolve. It's a prototype. Hopefully we can expand on it in the future. Another one of our prototypes is all about teaching underserved youth about climate and coastal change. And this is the Guardians of the Gulf AR app meant for middle school students aged 11 through 13. So Guardians of the Gulf is a product that was developed in partnership with the USF College of Marine Science. They've already got the Guardians of the Gulf after school program for underserved youth. They wanted to figure out a way to bring in some augmented reality and using Egmont Key as a test case in order to teach some of these key concepts about climate and coastal change. So what you can see here is how the activity works. There is a background map, and then there are 5 different tracking devices that you place on the yellow dots on the map, and they sort of answer questions. So what I'm going to do is play a little bit of a short screen recording here on the right, just so that you can hear some of their narration and see how the 3D map comes to life.
Your challenge is to choose 3 actions that will help keep Egmont Key healthy. There are 5 options in total. Before we begin, make sure you have the background called Egmont Key Map. You also need these triggers: reduce the bird sanctuary, beach cleanup, build a dog beach, plant seagrasses, and rebuild the beach.
So as you can see here in the screen recording, the background map comes to life in 3D, and then each of those tracking devices also comes to life in 3D.
Bringing friends with us to Egmont Key sounds like fun, but dogs can accidentally cause a lot of destruction. They might trample plants, chase shorebirds, and leave their stinky waste behind. It's best to leave dogs at home when visiting Egmont Key. Try a different answer.
So the whole experience is kind of gamified with right and wrong answers.
Bird sanctuaries do take up a good amount of space. However, while it might be tempting to free up that space for people, removing them is a bad idea. The birds need a safe place to live and have babies. Try another answer. Great job! Beach cleanups are a great way to get outside and enjoy the coastal community while also removing garbage or marine debris from the beach. Sometimes animals think trash is food, and they get sick if they eat it. By picking up trash, big and small, you help keep marine animals safe. Yes, we can often find solutions to our problems by looking to nature. Seagrass beds help protect the coast from storms and waves by decreasing the energy of the waves. They make the shoreline more stable. They also provide important habitats for lots of marine animals. Good choice! Adding sand to the beaches is called beach renourishment. Engineers pump sand on the beach from deeper areas of the ocean. They use backhoes to spread it around.
So that's just a quick synopsis of this activity. There are 3 activities in total. Some of them deal a little bit more with protecting wildlife and the effects of storms. This one has the most to do with cultural heritage, which is why I wanted to show it to this audience.
Your challenge is to choose 3 actions.
And then finally, we're also working at Egmont Key to involve the public in heritage monitoring, and this is through partnership with the Heritage Monitoring Scouts program of the Florida Public Archaeology Network. So this is kind of a growing initiative, something that we're starting to work on, but we really want to create a heritage monitoring station out on the western shoreline of Egmont Key. So we are working with our local stakeholders and land managers to gain permission to do that, but it's something that we really see as being part of the future. Of course, we can use geomatics technologies and LiDAR scanning to do some of this more advanced type of imaging and documentation and monitoring. But we also want to involve the public, involve citizen scientists, teach them the importance of Egmont Key, and of course, create a community of practice around preserving this island. So this is something that we are sort of seeing as a future goal and a long-term goal, but of course we've started to work with Florida Public Archaeology Network and have these conversations over the last couple of years. So in conclusion, the geomatics technologies can add precision to our analysis of heritage at risk, offering us an opportunity to look at these changes at a scale of millimeters and decades rather than meters and centuries. Additionally, VR, AR, and citizen science projects are an effective way to increase public understanding and involvement with heritage and sustainability. And that, of course, encompasses everything from touchscreens and QR code tours all the way through VR and AR and beyond.
And we're not just involved with local initiatives, we're really connected with the global United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, especially 11.4, which is safeguarding the world's natural and cultural heritage. And Egmont Key has plenty of both, but we also intersect with other SDGs, such as 8.9, which is promoting sustainable tourism, and also SDG number 13, which is climate action. And our work at Egmont Key has really brought to our attention the issue of marine debris and plastic pollution. And addressing that is covered under Sustainable Development Goal number 12, responsible consumption and production, and trying to reduce marine litter. So we're very much connected to global frameworks of action in our work at Egmont Key.
So in conclusion, the geomatics and public science communication are useful elements for Egmont Key's next comprehensive conservation plan. We see these as key ways that we can contribute from the academic side in order to, help develop this next framework. Hopefully it'll be coming out soon. And as Brooke and I mentioned, we are working with the land managers out there to bring that to fruition.
So please reach out if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Tidally United.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.